Hi everyone, this is Lisa Dickinson, Garden Girl at 2Ps, and I am here with the last installment of Seeing Double for 2013. Today I'm going to show you how I combined elements from two different digital cut files to make a really fun and colorful layout and card. So the holidays are over and I've spent a bit of time looking back through some of the photos that I took over the past month or so. These are two of my favorites of my daughter Riley with Santa. And I was thinking about the story I wanted to tell with these photos, and the thing that kept coming back to me was how genuinely happy and excited she was in this moment. I'm sure as scrapbookers you can relate to having kids that don't always cooperate and smile when you're trying to take photos of them, and this wasn't the case on this day. Riley was just, smiling ear to ear, and I didn't have to beg her to do it. So for this layout, I really want to convey the joy and happiness that she felt when getting to see Santa this day. And since there are so many festive cut files in the 2Ps digital store, I'm starting my design with two of them. I've printed them out here just to show you, but they'll also be linked in the supplies. These are the seasonal sayings, and they caught my eye because of the phrase merry and bright, which definitely fits with my page theme. And I'm thinking either of the words merry or bright would work well as a title. I'm also considering a second set of cut files, and that is these. They're the Christmas tags, and I'm not necessarily going to use the tags, but they have these words like merry, happy, jolly, and joy that all fit perfectly with my page. So I think I could ungroup the artwork and just use the word art because it's such a simple blocky font that it would mix really nicely with this handwritten script on the merry and bright. So right now my plan is to have my two photos next to each other and then do a vertical band that will incorporate a lot of bright colors and patterns. I almost always start my design by first picking out my papers, and I usually choose them based on the colors of my photos. So obviously here Santa is wearing red and my daughter's wearing dark blue, and then there's a little bit of green in the background. And I want to include those traditional holiday colors and possibly a few more just to make it colorful. So I went ahead and pulled out some papers in that color scheme. So I've got the reds and greens of Christmas, but I'm also wanting to add some blues to match Riley's dress. So I've grabbed a few different shades of blue patterns. And then I've also thrown in some pinks just for a bit more color and contrast. It's an unexpected color to use on a holiday page, but several of these patterns contain red, so they tie into the red papers I chose. Plus, pink is bright and happy, and it helps me reinforce that part of my story. So I keep coming back to this word merry, and my thought is to use it repeatedly in my vertical column design. So not only would it be my page title, but it would also be used as a repeating design element. Now the word merry also appears on these tags, and I'm thinking I could just ungroup the art, select this word that I want, and then cut it out instead of the whole tag. I love mixing different fonts, and these two are really perfect together because one is fairly simple and plain and the other is a bit more detailed. Just a note, if you don't have a die cutter to do this type of technique, both of these files that I'm using are available as a color printable, and when you purchase those at 2Ps you also get the PNG files, so you can edit them in Elements or Photoshop and resize them or recolor them and then print them out rather than cutting them out. I have gone ahead and made the cuts on my silhouette. This is the word from the seasonal sayings set right here. And then I also cut a second version of merry from the tag set right here. And I did enlarge it a little bit, but these cut files are really versatile and you can edit them in the Silhouette software and make them work for your design. So I've got all these die cuts now and I'm planning to repeat them down the page. I used the pattern papers I pulled out earlier, and I'm going to alternate the script word with the block word. I should mention that I kept the letters that were cut out of this block word where it's negative space now because I'm going to use these on my second project, so I've just set them aside for later. Now I'm just lining up my die cuts. I've got 6 of the script word and 6 of the block word, And these die cuts really add a lot of color and pattern, but by repeating the word Mary, I'm also reinforcing the emotions that are showcased in my photos. I'd like to keep the rest of my page fairly simple and clean because I've got a lot going on with this colorful column. I'm planning to put a block of journaling right here under my photos, and I'll probably set it up on my computer and then print it directly on the background. I might handwrite it too, depending on how much I want to say, but I can always get more words in the space if I use computer journaling. So something I need to decide on is my background. I like the white cardstock, but it's making this white border on my photos kind of unnecessary, and it's looking just a little bit plain Jane. I know I want my background to be fairly light and bright so that the elements pop off of it, but not necessarily this stark white cardstock. So I've grabbed this BasicGrey pad. It's from the Hey You collection, and it has a really nice mix of office-inspired designs like ledger papers and newsprints. There's some maps, like this ledger notebook type paper. But you can see that, let me find a neutral, this newsprint here, my photos with that white border really pops off of a background like that. It's a little bit busy for all of the patterns I have going on. But let's see, here's another grid that might be a good option. And I kind of like that. It's a little busy. But all of these papers are double-sided, just FYI. I know not all paper pads come that way, but this one is. I'm kind of liking this grid right here. It adds a little bit of texture without being too busy. So I'm going to go ahead and move some of these over here just to see what they'd look like. Yeah, I think that's good. I'm going to, let me see. Yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and commit to this background. And I'm going to go ahead and set up my journaling and print it out, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, here's my journaling printed on the grid pattern. And now I'm ready to start sticking down all of these little die cuts. I'm going to stack them in the column like I'd planned and let them overlap just a little bit. And I think I'm going to start adhering them from the bottom, just since that's where my journaling is, so that I don't accidentally overlap it. And I'm just using a small bit of adhesive on each piece because I'm planning to add some stitching to each row, and that will ultimately hold everything in place permanently. Okay, the words are stuck down, and I've also added machine stitching across each one just to hold them down. That way I don't have to worry about getting adhesive on every little area. My photos are going to be positioned here, and I always like just a little bit of a casual tilt. I'll put them right there. And I also want to add in some more bits and pieces to this column. I have these vellum die cuts from Studio Calico, and I've just pulled out some of the blue and pink and red ones. There's some starbursts and 5-point stars. And because these are vellum, they're really perfect for layering. They kind of add a soft touch. They're not too bright, but they really tie in nicely with my color scheme. Next, I've collected some brads from my stash in the 4 colors that are on my layout, and I just want to scatter a few of these around. I usually bend the prongs on my brads back so I can set them down on my design and just see how they look before I commit to sticking them through the paper. But I really like the dimension of these brads and the little bit of shine that the metal rim has. They add a nice bit of texture to this mostly flat column. As I'm looking for embellishments to use, I'm primarily concerned about their color. I want them to be blue, pink, green, or red to match my papers. And these star clips in navy, green, I think I have a white one that might work. They'll work with my colors, and again, they're adding just a little bit of dimension. And since they're essentially just the outline of a star shape, they're adding a shape without blocking out too much of my words. And since the theme of my page is Mary, I don't want to cover up a lot of these words and make them unreadable with my embellishments. Okay, I've secured all my little embellishments. On these two little star clips, I actually just slipped the clip part through my row of stitching to hold them so they kind of dangle and move a little bit on the page. And when I placed all of these different items, I tried to just get an even distribution of shapes so that the circles and stars were just sprinkled around. They kind of lead your eye through the whole column. And since my die cuts aren't perfectly aligned, that left some spaces to fill in with all of the embellishments. I also adhered my photos using foam squares just to pop them up off the page a bit. And after I did that, I realized there was a spot of somewhat trapped white space underneath them. So I added a stamped date just to fill up this spot. Now the only thing that's still kind of bugging me about this area is that it looks just a bit bare. I feel like I need to connect this side with my photos in the colorful column. The color and texture is just missing over here. So I grabbed a few more brads that I would like to cluster over here just to draw the eye into the journaling. I'm just going to arrange a trio of embellishments right here. These two brads and then a blue vellum star. And that helps pull some of my colors from the other side of the page. And it also helps lead the eye into my journaling block. So here's a look at my completed page. I think it definitely conveys the happiness and joy that the photos captured. I've tried to keep the photos as the focal point and include a meaningful story about them, but I've also added lots of little interesting details that reinforce my page theme and that help me effectively tell this story. My next seam double project is a card using some of the cutout letters from earlier. I have cut a cardstock base that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I covered it with this pink snowflake pattern from crepe paper. And then I also cut a slightly smaller piece of this grid pattern, and it's one from the same BasicGrey paper pad that I used on my layout. It'll eventually go on top of the pink base. But before I adhere it, I'm going to place all of these letters. I'm using 4 sets that spell out the word Mary. And once again, I'm just going to adhere them with a little bit of adhesive to hold them in place. And then I plan to add rows of machine stitching across each of the words. So now all the words are stitched down, and I've also printed out a sentiment on white cardstock. It just says Very Merry, and I'm going to add it between the 4 rows on the center of the card. I'm using some foam dots to do that, so it will just pop it up a little bit. Just like that. And then I'm going to secure this whole piece onto my base with a few more foam dots. Since I knew I was adding these rows of sewing to the front, I waited to adhere this piece to the card so that the stitching is hidden in between the layers and it doesn't show on the interior of the card. So as a finishing touch on this card, I'm adding a few clear rhinestones in a few places that will just add some sparkle and shine. I'm going to stick this last one down and I'll give you a closer look at the finished card. Thank you so much for joining me for this seam double. If you'd like more information on my projects or to view more scrapbook and project life videos, please visit 2peasinabucket.com.